The yielding was where wolves went to be taken, not chosen, not wanted, taken. And as Sable stood among the unclaimed, the broken, and the discarded, she understood one truth with perfect clarity. She was the worst of them all. The others had reasons for being here. Too old, too scarred, too stubborn to submit. But Sable? She was here because she was wrong, born wrong, made wrong. Her own pack had tried to kill her for it. She kept her eyes on the ground, and her scent locked down so tight it hurt. Because if anyone here discovered what she really was, the yielding would become an execution. Then the doors exploded open. She felt him before she saw him, a presence so overwhelming that every wolf in the hall dropped to their knees. Every wolf except Sable, who was too terrified to move. The Lycan king had come to the yielding. He walked past highborn females and warrior daughters without a glance. His boots stopped directly in front of her. "Look at me," he commanded. Sable raised her eyes and met a gaze like frozen silver. "Do you belong to anyone?" he asked. Her voice came out barely a whisper. "No." Something shifted in his expression, something dark and decided. "You do now." The hall erupted. But Sable stood frozen because she'd seen something in the Lycan King's eyes that no one else had noticed. He wasn't claiming her because he wanted her. He was claiming her because he was dying. Neither of them understood that saving him would require her to become the very thing her pack had tried to destroy. The stone floor of the great hall was cold beneath Sable's bare feet. That was intentional. Everything about the yielding was designed to remind the unclaimed of their place. You were not worthy of warmth. You were not worthy of comfort. You were barely worthy of breath. Sable had been standing for 3 hours now. Her legs ached, her throat burned with thirst, and her wolf paced restlessly beneath her skin, begging to be released. But she couldn't let her wolf surface. If she did, they would smell it. They would smell her. And then, she would die. Around her, 17 other females stood in a line that curved along the raised platform. Some wept silently. Others held their chins high with false pride. One clutched her swollen belly, abandoned by whatever male had put the pup there. But none of them drew as many whispers as Sable. "Why does she have no scent?" a nobleman muttered somewhere behind her. "Defective," another answered. "Must be. No wolf is scentless unless something's broken inside them." Broken. Yes, that was the word her pack had used, too. Right before they'd held her under the river and waited for her to stop breathing. She hadn't stopped. That was the problem. Sable kept her gaze fixed on the floor, but she felt eyes crawling over her like insects. She was the mystery, the anomaly. The female who smelled like nothing, belonged to no one, and had been dragged to the yielding by the very alpha who'd once tried to drown her. Corvinus. She could feel him now, standing at the edge of the platform with his arms crossed and his lips curved into something cruel. He'd sold her to the highest bidder. That was his right as her former alpha, and when no one bid, when she was declared worthless and unclaimed, he would have the legal authority to put her down. This was his revenge. Sable had survived his murder attempt 3 years ago. She'd crawled out of that river with ice in her lungs and fire in her blood. She'd run, hidden, starved. And somehow, she'd lived. But Corvinus had found her. "Lot number 18, the auctioneer called, his voice bored. Unclaimed female, unknown bloodline, no pack affiliation, no scent registration. He paused, and Sable heard the sneer in his voice. "Bidding starts at 50 silver. Silence. Sable's heart cracked, just a little. 40 silver. The auctioneer tried. More silence. Corvinus's laugh carried across the hall. Low, satisfied. 30 silver. Anyone. The female is young and reasonably healthy. She would make an adequate... The great doors slammed open. Every conversation died mid-word. Every head turned. and Sable felt something she'd never felt before in her 23 years of existence. Terror. Pure, absolute terror. The presence that rolled through those doors wasn't just alpha. It was ancient, primordial. The kind of dominance that existed before packs had names, before territories had borders, before wolves learned to kneel. This was the presence of a king. Sable's legs gave out. She hit her knees on the cold stone, and she wasn't alone. Every wolf in the hall had dropped, even Corvinus, even the auctioneer. Only one figure remained standing. He walked through the silence like he owned it, tall, broad, wrapped in black from throat to boots. His hair was dark as a moonless night, falling past his jaw in a way that should have softened his features, but somehow made them more brutal. And his eyes, silver, not gray, not pale blue, actual silver, like coins melted and poured into his skull. The Lycan king of Valdrris. Sable had heard stories. Every wolf had. Theron Valdrris, who had united the fractured kingdoms before his 25th year. Theron Valdrris, who had killed 6 challengers in a single night and hadn't even shifted to do it. Theron Valdrris, whose line was so ancient that some whispered his wolf wasn't a wolf at all, but something older, something darker, something dying. That last rumor was spoken only in shadows. But looking at him now, Sable understood why. His skin was pale, too pale for a Lycan, and despite the power radiating from him like heat from a forge, there was something beneath it. Something cold. "Continue," he said. His voice was deep, commanding, utterly empty of warmth. The auctioneer scrambled to his feet, nearly tripping over his own robes. "Your Majesty, we are honored beyond measure. To have you grace the yielding with your—" I said continue. The auctioneer flinched as if struck. Of course, we were on lot 18, unclaimed female, no bloodline, no scent, no— I heard. The king's boots echoed against the stone as he walked toward the platform. The crowd parted before him like water before a blade. He passed noblewomen dressed in silks. He passed warrior daughters with kill counts higher than their years. He passed every female who had been brought here hoping to catch a powerful male's eye. He stopped in front of Sable. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at the black leather of his boots inches from her knees. The silence stretched. Then, cutting through it like a blade through silk. "Look at me." Sable's body refused to obey. Every instinct screamed at her to stay down, to keep her eyes on the floor, to make herself small and invisible and forgettable. That's how she'd survived this long. That's how she'd escaped Corvinus the first time. But the Lycan king had given a command. And her wolf, the wolf she'd kept caged and silent for 3 years, responded before Sable could stop it. Her head lifted, her eyes rose, and she met the gaze of Theron Valdrris. Silver. His eyes were truly silver, and up close they were even more unsettling. Because they weren't cold the way she'd expected. They were searching. Intense. Fixed on her with an attention that made her feel stripped bare. He was scenting her. No, trying to scent her. Sable watched his nostrils flare, watched a subtle frown crease between his dark brows. He inhaled again, deeper this time, and his frown deepened. "You have no scent," he said. "Not a question." "No, Your Majesty." "Why?" The question hung in the air. Behind him, the hall remained deathly silent. Sable could feel Corvinus's fury burning from the edge of the platform, could feel the auctioneer's confusion, could feel hundreds of eyes watching this impossible interaction. Why would the Lycan king care about the scentless female worth less than 30 silver? "I don't know, Your Majesty," Sable answered. It was the truth, and also a lie. She didn't know why she had no scent. But she knew it was connected to the same wrongness that had made her pack try to kill her. Theron studied her for a long moment. Then he did something that made the entire hall gasp. He crouched down to her level. Now they were eye to eye. His face was inches from hers. She could see the sharp cut of his cheekbones, the hard line of his jaw, the way his silver eyes seemed to glow with an inner light. And she could feel the cold radiating from him. It wasn't natural. Lycans ran hot. Everyone knew that. But the Lycan king's presence felt like standing at the edge of winter, like frost creeping across a window, like death's own breath. "Do you belong to anyone?" he asked quietly. The question was almost gentle. Almost. Sable swallowed hard. No. No pack? They cast me out. No mate? No. No male has any claim on you? Any bond? Any debt? Any contract? No, Your Majesty, I belong to no one. The words were barely out of her mouth when she saw it. A flicker in those silver eyes. Not warmth, not desire. Something else entirely. Recognition. As if she'd given him exactly the answer he needed. Then you belong to me. The hall exploded. Shouts of disbelief echoed off the stone walls. Noble women shrieked in outrage. Warriors cursed. The auctioneer dropped his ledger, papers scattering across the platform like startled birds. And Corvinus. Corvinus was pushing through the crowd, his face twisted with something between fury and fear. "Your Majesty, wait. You don't understand. That female is defective. Dangerous. Her pack sentenced her to death for crimes against—" "What is your name?" Theron asked, ignoring Corvinus entirely. His eyes never left Sable's face. "Sable," she whispered. "Sable." He said it slowly, as if tasting it. "A shadow name." "Your Majesty." Corvinus had reached the edge of the platform. "I must insist you reconsider. This female is not fit to serve as anything, let alone. You are the alpha who brought her here." It wasn't a question. Theron still hadn't looked away from Sable, but his voice had changed. Colder now. Sharper. "Yes, Your Majesty. I am Corvinus of the Greymore Pack, and I have documentation proving this female was lawfully sentenced to—" "Sentenced for what crime?" Corvinus hesitated, just for a heartbeat. But Sable saw it, and so did the king. "She is unnatural, Your Majesty, born without a scent. It's an abomination. Our pack laws clearly state—" "Your pack laws hold no authority over my claim." Theron rose to his full height, and the temperature in the hall seemed to drop 10 degrees. "This female is mine now. Any claim you held is severed. Any sentence you imposed is void." He finally turned to look at Corvinus. And Sable saw the alpha flinch back, as if struck. "And if you speak another word against what belongs to me, I will consider it a challenge to my authority. Do you wish to challenge me, Alpha Corvinus?" Corvinus's face went white. "No, Your Majesty." "Then we are finished here." Theron extended his hand to Sable. Pale fingers, elegant and long, radiating cold like morning frost. "Come," he said. "We leave tonight." Sable took his hand. His skin was ice. She flinched, and something flickered across his face. Shame, perhaps, or resignation. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that same cold mask. "You'll become accustomed to it," he said quietly, and for the first time there was something almost human in his voice, something tired. He pulled her to her feet, and the hall watched in stunned silence as the Lycan king led the scentless, worthless female toward the great doors. Behind them, Sable heard Corvinus's furious whisper to one of his men. "Send word to the council. Tell them the king has claimed a shadow wolf." Sable's blood turned to ice. He knew. Corvinus knew what she was. And if the council found out— But she couldn't stop. Couldn't run. Could only follow the cold grip of the Lycan king as he led her out of the yielding and into an uncertain future. She didn't know why he'd chosen her. She didn't know what he wanted. But as his carriage pulled away from the hall, carrying her toward the kingdom of Valdrris, one question burned in her mind brighter than all the others. If he was dying, why did he need her? The carriage moved through the night in silence. Haney Sable sat on the velvet seat across from the Lycan king, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her heart pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. Outside the small window, the world was darkness and shadows, the trees of the northern road blurring past like ghosts. Theron hadn't spoken since they'd left the yielding. He sat with his back against the seat, his silver eyes fixed on something beyond the window, his expression carved from stone. In the flickering lamplight of the carriage, he looked less like a king and more like a statue. Beautiful in the way a glacier was beautiful, untouchable, impossibly cold, and dying. Sable couldn't stop thinking about it. The rumors she'd heard in her years of running, hiding, surviving on scraps and shadows. The Lycan king was cursed, the Lycan king was sick. The Lycan king had no heir because no female could survive the bonding. She'd dismissed those rumors as jealous whispers from rival packs. But now, sitting across from him, feeling the unnatural chill that radiated from his body despite the warmth of the enclosed carriage, she wasn't so sure. "You're staring." His voice made her jump. He still wasn't looking at her, but the corner of his mouth had curved, just slightly. Not a smile. Something darker. "Forgive me, Your Majesty." "Theron." Sable blinked. "What?" "My name is Theron. You'll use it when we're alone." Something strange twisted in her chest. Not quite fear, not quite hope. Something in between. "Why?" she asked before she could stop herself. Now he did look at her. Those silver eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Because you're going to be my queen." The carriage seemed to lurch, though it hadn't changed speed. Sable's hands gripped the edge of her seat. "Your queen? Did you think I claimed you for sport?" He tilted his head, studying her reaction with clinical precision. "I need a mate. You are available. The arrangement is simple." Simple. He said it as if he were discussing the purchase of livestock, not the claiming of a wife. "Your Majesty." Theron. Theron. The name felt strange on her tongue. Forbidden. You could have anyone. Princesses from allied kingdoms, noble women from ancient bloodlines, warrior daughters with power and connections and sense. The word hung between them. "They all have sense," Theron continued quietly. "Desires written in their blood. Ambitions I can smell before they speak a word. They want power. They want the crown. They want to mother heirs to the greatest kingdom in the realm." His jaw tightened. "They want me. And that's bad?" His laugh was soft and utterly humorless. "When I touch them, their scent changes. They imagine futures with me. Bonds. Love." The last word came out like a curse. "I cannot give them what they want. I cannot give anyone what they want. But you." He leaned forward, and Sable pressed back against her seat instinctively. "You have no scent," he said. "I cannot read your desires. I cannot smell your expectations. And that makes you perfect." Perfect. She'd been called many things in her life. Defective, wrong, abomination, monster. Never perfect. "I don't understand," she admitted. Theron's expression flickered. For just a moment, something almost vulnerable passed through those silver eyes, and then it was gone, replaced by cold resolution. "There will be terms," he said. "Conditions to our arrangement. If you agree to them, you will want for nothing. Gold, gowns, chambers fit for a queen, protection from whatever made your pack try to kill you." His gaze sharpened. "Yes, I know about that. Corvinus's outburst made it clear enough. You were sentenced to death, and yet here you are, alive, unclaimed, scentless." Sable's throat tightened. "I didn't do anything wrong." "I don't care if you did." The bluntness of it shocked her. "Whatever crime they accused you of, whatever reason they had to want you dead, it doesn't concern me," Theron continued. "What concerns me is the arrangement. Are you willing to hear my terms?" Sable thought of Corvinus, of the council he was contacting, of the word he'd whispered, Shadow Wolf. And she didn't fully understand what that meant, but she understood the fear in his voice when he'd said it. And she understood that without Theron's protection, she would be dead within a week. I'm willing, she said. Theron nodded once, then began. First, you will marry me within 3 days of our arrival at Valdrris. The ceremony will be private. Only essential witnesses. I understand. Second, you will give me an heir, preferably more than one, to ensure the succession. Sable's cheeks flushed, but she nodded. Third, here, his voice changed, became harder. You will not attempt to form an emotional bond with me. You will not ask about my past. You will not try to cure me, comfort me, or understand me. And above all else? He leaned closer, and the cold that surrounded him seemed to sharpen, seemed to cut. You will never try to make me love you. The words landed like a physical blow. If you can accept these terms, Theron said quietly, I will protect you for the rest of your life. No one will harm you. No one will hunt you. You will be Queen of Valdrris, mother to my heirs, and when I am gone... He stopped. The muscles in his jaw tightened. When you are gone, Sable whispered. When I am gone, you will rule in our children's stead until they come of age. He pulled back, and the cold retreated with him. Those are my terms. Do you accept? Sable sat in silence, her mind racing. He was dying. He'd almost admitted it. When I am gone? Not if. He didn't expect to survive, and he wanted a queen who wouldn't mourn him, wouldn't love him, wouldn't try to save him. He wanted a stranger in his bed and a mother for children he'd never see grow. It should have terrified her. It did terrify her. But beneath the terror was something else. Understanding. He was alone. Not because no one wanted him, but because everyone wanted too much from him. And he couldn't give them what they wanted because he was dying. Why can't I try to make you love me? She asked quietly. Theron went very still. Because love is not possible for me. Is that part of the curse? His silver eyes flashed dangerously. How do you know about the curse? Everyone knows. They whisper about it in every pack from here to the southern seas. The Lycan king is cursed. The Lycan king is dying. No one knows why. For a long moment, Theron said nothing. Then slowly he exhaled. The curse is real, he admitted. But its nature is not your concern. All you need to know is that love is not something I can offer. Not to anyone, and pursuing it will only bring you pain. Sable studied him in the lamplight, the hard lines of his face, the shadows beneath his silver eyes, the way his hands, resting on his knees, seemed almost translucent with cold. He wasn't cruel. That was what struck her most. His words were harsh, but there was no malice behind them. Only truth, delivered as gently as a dying man could manage. I accept your terms, she said. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or relief. You do? Yes. Sable straightened her spine, meeting his gaze without flinching. I have no pack, no home, no future beyond whatever Corvinus had planned for me, which I suspect was death. She paused. You're offering me safety, protection, and a crown. All I have to give in return is children and distance. Most women would consider that a tragedy. Most women weren't nearly drowned by their own alpha for the crime of existing. Silence stretched between them. Then, impossibly, Theron's lips twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. You're strange, he said. So I've been told. He held out his hand. Pale fingers, elegant and long, radiating cold like morning frost. Then we have a bargain, Sable of Nopak. She took his hand. The ice of his skin no longer shocked her. She was learning to expect it. We have a bargain, Theron of Valdrris. The carriage rolled on through the night, carrying them toward a kingdom she'd never seen and a future she couldn't imagine. And in the darkness of her own mind, one question whispered, if he truly couldn't love, why did his eyes look so sad when he said it? The kingdom of Valdrris was carved from winter itself. Sable pressed her face to the carriage window as they passed through the great gates, her breath fogging against the glass. She'd heard stories of the northern kingdom, whispered tales of ice-capped mountains and forests so dark that sunlight never touched the ground. But nothing had prepared her for the reality. The castle rose from the frozen earth like a crown of black stone and silver spires. Torches burned along the battlements, their flames fighting against the endless gray of the sky. Snow dusted everything, a thin white layer that made the world look clean and untouched, and utterly merciless. This was Theron's home, this frozen, beautiful, terrifying place. And in 3 days, it would be hers. Those 3 days passed in a blur of preparations she barely understood. Servants measured her for gowns. Advisors briefed her on protocol she couldn't remember. Cooks asked about foods she'd never tasted. Everyone moved around her with urgent efficiency, preparing for a royal wedding while looking at her with barely concealed confusion. Why her? Sable saw the question in every pair of eyes. The noblewomen who curtsied with tight smiles, the guards who escorted her through corridors of black stone, the ministers who bowed and called her "my lady," while their gazes lingered on her unremarkable face, her simple features, her complete lack of noble bearing. Why would the king choose her? She wondered the same thing. Theron had been absent since their arrival. Matters of state, his steward had explained. The king was a busy man. But Sable suspected there was more to it. He was avoiding her. Maintaining the distance he'd demanded in the carriage. That was fine. Distance she could handle. Distance was safe. On the morning of the 3rd day, a knock came at her chamber door. "Enter," Sable called. The door opened to reveal a woman Sable hadn't seen before. Tall, elegant, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe knot. She wore the black and silver of the royal household, but her bearing suggested something more than a servant. "I am Meridia," the woman said, "chief advisor to His Majesty. I've come to prepare you for the ceremony." Sable stood from her dressing table. "I thought the maids were handling—" "The maids handle gowns and cosmetics. I handle everything else." Meridia's sharp eyes swept over Sable with cool assessment. "You're smaller than I expected, and plainer." The bluntness would have stung once. Now it barely registered. "I'm aware," Sable said simply. Something flickered in Meridia's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or approval. "Good. You don't waste time on false modesty. That will serve you well here." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "There are things you should know before you stand beside him at that altar." Sable's pulse quickened. "What things?" "The court will test you. They'll watch for weakness, for cracks they can exploit. Some will try to befriend you. Others will try to destroy you. And all of them will wonder why the king chose a scentless nobody from the yielding." "Let them wonder." Meridia's lips curved just slightly. "You have spine. Good. You'll need it." She paused, her gaze growing serious. "There's something else. In something about the king." Sable held her breath. "He hasn't told you about the curse," Meridia said. "Not a question. He mentioned it exists. Nothing more." Meridia nodded slowly. "Then I'll tell you only this. Whatever happens tonight, whatever you see or feel, do not be afraid of him. He would never hurt you. Not intentionally." Her voice softened, just barely. "He's been alone a very long time. Sometimes I think he's forgotten how to be anything else." Before Sable could respond, the bells began to toll. The ceremony was held in the great hall of Valdrris, a cavernous space of black stone and silver chandeliers. Sable walked the long aisle alone, her gown trailing behind her like a river of white silk. There was no father to give her away, no pack to witness her bonding, only strangers. And at the altar, waiting in black formal attire that made his pale skin look almost ghostly, stood Theron. Their eyes met across the distance, and Sable's heart stuttered. He looked worse than he had 3 days ago. Paler, thinner. The shadows beneath his silver eyes had deepened to bruises. But when she reached the altar, when she stood before him close enough to feel that unnatural cold radiating from his body, he offered her his hand. She took it. Ice. His fingers were pure ice. But he held her gently, and his thumb traced a small circle against her wrist. A reassurance. A silent promise. The officiant began to speak. Words about bonds and duty and eternal vows. Sable barely heard them. She was too focused on the man before her, on the tension in his jaw. On the way, his grip tightened on her hand when the officiant asked if any present objected to the union. Silence. Heavy, weighted silence. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, a voice. "The council demands to know the bloodline of the bride." Theron went rigid. Sable's blood turned to ice colder than his touch. She knew that voice. Corvinus. He'd come. Somehow he'd gotten into Valdrris, into the ceremony, and now... "The bride's bloodline is irrelevant," Theron said. His voice was calm, but Sable felt the fury vibrating through his grip. "She is my chosen mate. That is all the council needs to know." "With respect, Your Majesty." Corvinus stepped forward from the crowd, his smile sharp as broken glass. "The council has reason to believe your bride may be a shadow wolf. If that's true, she cannot legally what?" The temperature in the hall plummeted. Sable watched frost spread across the floor from where Theron stood. Watched the chandeliers tremble as his power filled the room like a physical weight. Watched Corvinus's smile falter and die. "She cannot legally exist without registration," Corvinus managed, though his voice had lost its confidence. "Shadow wolves are required by law to..." "The law you cite was written 300 years ago by a king who feared what he didn't understand." Theron's silver eyes blazed with cold fire. "I am the law now, and I say this woman is my queen. Any who disagree are welcome to challenge me for the right to object." Silence. Absolute terrified silence. Corvinus backed away, his face white. Theron turned back to Sable, and the fury in his expression softened into something almost gentle. "Continue," he told the officiant. The ceremony concluded without further interruption. When the officiant declared them bonded, Theron raised Sable's hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. His mouth was cold, but the gesture was warm in a way she hadn't expected. "My queen," he murmured, so quietly only she could hear. And despite everything, despite the terror and the confusion and the cold, Sable felt something bloom in her chest. Hope. Fragile, foolish hope. The royal chambers were vast and dark and cold. Sable stood just inside the doorway, her wedding gown suddenly feeling too thin, too revealing. The room was dominated by an enormous bed draped in black silk, its posts carved with wolves running through an endless forest. A fire burned in the hearth, but even from across the room, she could tell it wasn't enough to chase away the chill. Nothing was ever enough to chase away the chill here. Behind her, the door clicked shut. She turned to find Theron standing with his back against the wood, watching her with those silver eyes. He'd removed his formal jacket, leaving only a white shirt that hung loose at his throat. In the firelight, he looked less like a king and more like a ghost. "You're afraid," he said. "It wasn't a question." "A little," Sable admitted. He nodded slowly, as if this was the response he'd expected. Then he pushed away from the door and walked to a cabinet near the window. She watched him pour 2 cups of warm spiced tea, his movements precise and controlled. Drink this. He offered her a cup. It will help you relax. Sable took it, or their fingers brushing, cold, always cold. She sipped the tea and felt warmth spread through her chest, chasing away some of the tension. Thank you, she said quietly, for what you did. At the ceremony. With Corvinus. Theron's expression flickered. He should never have been allowed inside the castle. I'll be investigating how that happened. He said I'm a shadow wolf. Sable gripped her cup tighter. I don't even know what that means. It means nothing. It clearly means something. He looked at me like I was a monster. The council. The council can burn for all I care. The venom in his voice startled her. Theron turned away, setting his untouched tea on the windowsill. Shadow wolves are an ancient bloodline, he said, his voice quieter now. Rare. Almost extinct. They were hunted centuries ago because their abilities were considered dangerous. What abilities? He was silent for a long moment. Then, it doesn't matter. Whatever you are, whatever your bloodline, you're under my protection now. No one will touch you. Sable set down her cup and crossed the room to stand behind him. This close, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the rigid set of his spine. He was wound tight as a bowstring. Why did you really choose me? She asked softly. Theron didn't turn around. I told you. You have no scent. You're perfect. Yes. You said that. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the cold radiating from his body. But there's more to it, isn't there? Something you're not telling me. His hands, resting on the windowsill, clenched into fists. You ask too many questions. You made me your queen. I think I've earned a few questions. He turned then, so quickly she stumbled back. But he caught her, his cold hands gripping her arms, steadying her. They stood frozen like that, inches apart, his silver eyes boring into hers. You want to know why I chose you? His voice was rough, strained. Because when I touched you at the yielding, when I held your hand and felt nothing but your warmth, I could breathe. For the first time in months, the cold retreated. Just for a moment. Sable stared at him. I don't understand. The curse. He released her arms, stepping back. It's killing me. Has been for years. But it's accelerating now. The cold spreads a little more each day. Soon it will reach my heart. And when it does... He didn't finish. You'll die, Sable whispered. Yes. The word hung between them, heavy and final. Your warmth, Theron continued quietly, affects me in ways I don't understand. When you touch me, the cold lessens. Not much. Not enough. But more than anything else ever has. Sable's heart was pounding. Is that why you need an heir? Because you're running out of time? Yes. Honesty. Brutal, painful honesty. She should have felt used. Should have felt like nothing more than a vessel, a tool for his survival. But looking at him now, seeing the resignation in his silver eyes, the acceptance of his own death, she felt something else entirely. Compassion. Then we shouldn't waste time, she said. Theron blinked. What? Sable reached up and began unfastening the clasps of her gown. Her fingers trembled, but her voice was steady. You need warmth. You need an heir. I'm your wife now. She met his gaze without flinching. Let me help you. Something shifted in his expression. Something cracked behind those silver eyes. You don't have to do this, he said hoarsely. Not tonight. Not because you feel obligated. I don't feel obligated. She let the first clasp fall open. I feel chosen. For the first time in my life, someone chose me. Not despite what I am, but maybe because of it. Sable. Let me help you, Theron. He moved then, closed the distance between them in one stride and cupped her face in his cold hands. She gasped at the temperature, but didn't pull away. "I can't love you," he said, the words torn from somewhere deep. "The curse won't allow it. If I feel too much, if I let myself care, the cold will accelerate. And it will kill me faster." "Then don't love me." Sable covered his hands with her own, pressing warmth into his frozen skin. "Just let me be warm for you." The sound he made was almost a groan. When he kissed her, his lips were ice, but beneath the cold, she tasted desperation. Loneliness. A man who had been frozen for so long he'd forgotten what warmth felt like. She gave him everything she had. They moved to the bed in a tangle of fabric and breath. His hands were careful, reverent, as if she might break. And every time his cold skin pressed against her warmth, she heard his breath hitch, felt him shudder. "You're so warm," he murmured against her throat. "How are you so warm?" She didn't have an answer, only instinct. Only the strange certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. When they came together, she gasped at the cold, but it didn't hurt. It felt like plunging into a winter lake, shocking and exhilarating and somehow, impossibly, right. And when she wrapped her arms around him, when she pulled him closer and let her warmth seep into his frozen body, she felt him exhale against her shoulder. A sound of relief so profound it nearly broke her heart. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the silk sheets. His arm was draped over her waist, his face pressed against her hair. She could feel his heartbeat, slow and steady. Warmer. She could swear his skin was warmer than it had been an hour ago. "Stay," she whispered. "Please stay tonight." He was silent for so long she thought he'd fallen asleep. Then quietly, "I shouldn't." "Why?" "Because if I stay, I might want to stay every night. And wanting things is dangerous for me." Sable turned in his arms, facing him. In the dying firelight, his silver eyes looked almost human. "Then be dangerous," she said, "just for tonight." Something flickered in his gaze. Pain, longing, fear. And then, so softly she almost missed it. "Just for tonight." He pulled her closer, and for the first time since she'd met him, his embrace didn't feel cold. It felt like home. When she woke at dawn, he was gone. But on the pillow beside her was a single winter rose, its petals white as snow, its stem wrapped in silver ribbon. And beneath it, a note in elegant handwriting. "Thank you." He came back. That was what surprised Sable most in the days that followed. The king who had sworn to maintain distance, who had warned her never to expect love, returned to her chambers that second night. And the third, and every night after. At first, he offered excuses, checking on her health, ensuring she was comfortable, discussing matters of the household. But the discussions always ended the same way, with his cold hands on her warm skin, with whispered words in the darkness, with two bodies seeking something neither was willing to name. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Sable began to notice changes. Small things at first, the color returning to Theron's cheeks, the shadows beneath his eyes growing lighter instead of darker, the frost that had crept up his forearms retreating inch by inch. He was healing. She was healing him. But more than that, he was changing. The first time he laughed, she nearly fell off the bed. It happened on the 14th night. She'd been telling him about her childhood. He carefully edited to remove the worst parts. And she'd mentioned the time she'd tried to catch a fish with her bare hands and ended up falling face first into the river. And he laughed. Not a polite chuckle, not a cold smirk. An actual laugh. Warm and surprised, and so unlike the frozen king she'd married that Sable could only stare at him. "What?" he asked, still smiling. "It was funny." "You laughed." "I'm capable of laughter." "Are you? Because I wasn't sure." His smile faded slightly, but something warm remained in his eyes. "I haven't had much to laugh about. Not in a long time. Sable reached out and traced her fingers along his jaw. His skin was cool, but not cold. Not ice. Just cool. Then I'll have to give you more reasons, she said softly. He caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. You already do. After that, things shifted. He started arriving earlier, sometimes before dinner, sometimes before sunset. He'd find her in the library or the gardens or her chambers, and he'd simply stay. They'd talk for hours about the kingdom, about his childhood, about the weight of the crown and the loneliness of power. He told her about his mother, who had died giving birth to him, about his father, who had blamed him for her death and treated him with cold indifference until his own death 10 years later, about the curse that had been placed on him the moment he'd been crowned, a parting gift from an enemy kingdom that wanted to ensure the Valdrris line would end with him. The curse feeds on emotion, he explained one evening, as they sat together by the fire in her chambers. The more I feel, the faster it spreads. Love, anger, joy, grief, and it doesn't matter. Any strong emotion accelerates the cold. Sable leaned against his shoulder. So you learned not to feel. I learned to freeze. She thought of the man she'd met at the yielding, the cold, emotionless king who had looked at her with silver eyes empty of everything, and she thought of the man beside her now, still reserved, still guarded, but warming. You're feeling now, she said quietly. His arm tightened around her. Yes. Aren't you afraid? A long pause, then, terrified, she tilted her head to look at him. Then why do you keep coming back? Theron met her gaze, and for just a moment the mask fell away completely. She saw everything he'd been hiding, the loneliness, the desperation, the desperate, impossible hope that had made him choose a scentless nobody at an auction for the unwanted. Because you make me want to feel, he said. Even if it kills me. Sable's heart cracked. She kissed him then, soft and slow, trying to pour everything she couldn't say into the gesture. He responded with equal tenderness, his cold hands warming against her skin. They didn't make love that night. They just held each other, wrapped in blankets before the fire, and Sable listened to his heartbeat slow into sleep. And she admitted the truth she'd been avoiding. I love him. The realization hit her like a blow to the chest. She loved him. This frozen, broken, impossible man who had claimed her from an auction and offered her a kingdom in exchange for warmth. She loved his rare smiles and his careful touches and the way his silver eyes softened when he looked at her. She loved him, and he could never know, because love would kill him. And the curse fed on emotion. He'd said it himself. And love was the strongest emotion of all. If she told him how she felt, if she let him see the depth of what was growing in her heart, it might accelerate the curse beyond any hope of recovery. So she held him in the darkness and said nothing. But her wolf knew. Her wolf, who had been silent and dormant for so long, stirred beneath her skin for the first time since her pack had tried to drown her. It stretched and paced and whispered one word over and over. Mate. He was her mate. The bond was forming, whether they wanted it or not. Every night they spent together, every touch, every shared breath, wove them tighter together. Soon it would be undeniable. Soon he would feel it too. And then what? Sable lay awake long after Theron fell asleep, watching the firelight play across his face. He looked younger in sleep. Peaceful. The hard lines of his jaw softened, and his breathing came easy and deep. She pressed a hand to her stomach, wondering. It had been over a month now. She hadn't bled since before the yielding. And lately, she'd been feeling different. Tired in ways sleep didn't fix. Sensitive to smells she'd never noticed before. Could she be pregnant already? The thought should have frightened her. Another step toward completing the bargain. another reason for him to maintain distance once he had what he needed. But looking at him now, feeling the warmth that radiated between them despite the cold that still lingered in his bones, Sable didn't feel frightened. She felt hope. Fragile, dangerous, impossible hope. And that terrified her most of all. 6 weeks after her wedding, Sable knew for certain. She stood in her chambers, one hand pressed flat against her stomach, the other gripping the edge of her dressing table. The healer had just left, her words still echoing in Sable's mind. "Congratulations, Your Majesty. You're carrying the royal heir." Pregnant. She was pregnant with Theron's child. Sable stared at her reflection in the mirror. She looked the same as she had yesterday. The same unremarkable features, the same dark hair falling past her shoulders, the same eyes that had seen too much hardship for someone her age. But everything was different now. A life grew inside her. A tiny spark of warmth in her belly, half her and half the frozen king who had claimed her from an auction. Their child, their heir. She should tell him immediately. This was what he wanted, what he needed. And the entire purpose of their arrangement was to produce an heir before the curse claimed him. So why did her hands shake at the thought? Because once he knows, she realized, he won't need me anymore. The thought hit her like a physical blow. She gripped the table harder, steadying herself against the wave of grief that crashed through her chest. This was always the bargain. Children in exchange for protection, distance in exchange for safety. She'd agreed to those terms with clear eyes and a pragmatic heart. But that was before he started laughing at her stories, before he held her through the night instead of leaving at dawn, before he looked at her with silver eyes that had begun to warm, to soften, to see her as something more than a vessel for his legacy. Before she fell in love with him. Now the bargain felt like a blade pressed against her throat. He would have his heir. The arrangement would be fulfilled, and she would spend the rest of her life loving a man who had sworn never to love her back. Unless... Sable's hand moved in slow circles over her stomach. Unless he felt something too. She'd seen the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. The way his cold hands lingered on her skin, tracing patterns that had nothing to do with duty. The way he said her name sometimes, soft and reverent, like a prayer he didn't know he was making. Could he love her? Could he already? The question terrified her. Because if he did, if he allowed himself to feel what she felt, the curse would accelerate. It would kill him. Love was a death sentence for Theron Valdrris. And yet she couldn't stop wanting it. That evening, Theron arrived at her chambers earlier than usual. He'd brought warm bread and fruit from the kitchen, arranging them on the small table by the fire with an awkwardness that made her heart ache. "You're spoiling me," she said, settling into the chair across from him. "You're my queen." He paused, studying her face with sudden intensity. "Something's different. You look, I don't know, different." Sable's breath caught. "The healer came to see me today." Theron went very still. "And?" She couldn't speak, could only nod. His silver eyes widened. For a long, terrible moment, Sable couldn't read his expression at all. Then, slowly, he rose from his chair, crossed to her, and knelt before her. "May I?" he asked quietly, gesturing to her stomach. Her throat tight, she nodded again. He pressed his palm flat against her belly. His hand was cool, but not cold. Not ice. The improvement was remarkable, undeniable. 2 months of warmth, 2 months of her, had pushed the curse back further than anything else ever had. "Our child," he breathed. The wonder in his voice shattered something inside her. "Theron, you've given me everything." His silver eyes glistened in the firelight. "Everything I needed. Everything I never dared hope for. And He stopped. His jaw tightened. She watched him wrestle with something, some emotion he was trying to suppress. You what? She whispered. I'm grateful, he said finally. But the word sounded hollow, wrong, like a door closing instead of opening. Sable's heart cracked. He was pulling back. She could feel it. Now that the bargain was nearly complete, now that she carried his heir, he was retreating behind his walls again. Protecting himself. Protecting her. Protecting them both from the curse that would kill him if he felt too much. You'll stop coming, she said. It wasn't a question. Theron's hand fell away from her stomach. He rose, turning toward the fire so she couldn't see his face. It would be safer. For whom? For both of us. His voice was rough. The curse. I can feel it responding. To you. To this. He gestured vaguely at the space between them. If I continue, if I let myself... Feel? He flinched as if she'd struck him. I can't love you, Sable. The words came out broken. Not because I don't want to, because if I do, I'll die before our child takes its first breath. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. And if you leave? If you stay away and harden your heart again? She stood, crossing to him, placing her hand on his rigid back. What then? You'll survive? But for what? To watch from a distance while our child grows up without knowing you? Better that than not being alive at all. Is it? He turned, and she saw the agony written across his face. The war between what he wanted and what he thought was right. I've lived my entire life frozen, he said quietly. I didn't know what warmth was until you. But I also know what I am. What I've always been. His hand rose to cup her cheek, cold fingers gentle against her skin. I am winter, Sable, and winter kills everything it touches. Not me. Perhaps especially you. His thumb traced her cheekbone. You've thawed me in ways I didn't know were possible, and that terrifies me more than dying ever could. She covered his hand with her own, pressing his palm harder against her face. Then be terrified, she said fiercely. Be terrified and stay anyway. Fight for us. Fight for our child. Fight for the life we could have if you'd just stop protecting yourself long enough to live it. Something flickered in his silver eyes. Hope. Fear. Longing. You don't understand, he whispered. Then help me understand. He was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. The curse was meant to end my line. An enemy kingdom placed it on me the day I was crowned. They knew that a Valdrris who couldn't love would never produce a true heir. That even if I fathered children, the bond would never form. And without the bond, the royal bloodline would eventually weaken and fade. He exhaled slowly. But then I found you. And when I touch you, when I'm with you, the curse weakens. You're doing something to it. To me. Sable's heart pounded. That's good, isn't it? It should be. But the curse is fighting back. The more I feel for you, the harder it pushes. It's like... He struggled for words. Like a dam holding back a flood. Every emotion I allow myself adds more pressure. And eventually, the dam will break. What happens when it breaks? He met her eyes, and she saw the truth there. Either the curse shatters completely, he said quietly, or my heart freezes solid and I die instantly. Sable's blood ran cold. There's no middle ground? None. She absorbed this, her mind racing. And you don't know which outcome is more likely? No. His hand fell away from her face. That's why I have to pull back. That's why I can't risk loving me. The words hung between them, heavy and fragile. Yes, he breathed. Sable looked at the man before her, the frozen king who had thawed in her arms, the father of her child, the mate her wolf had claimed whether either of them wanted it or not. And she made a decision. Then don't tell me, she said quietly. Don't say the words. Don't acknowledge what you feel. But don't leave me either. Don't make me carry this child alone while you freeze yourself back into a statue. She took his hands in hers, warming them with her grip. Stay with me. Fight beside me. And when the time comes, when the dam breaks, Sable, we'll face it together. He stared at her as if she'd offered him salvation and damnation in the same breath. You're asking me to risk everything. No, she whispered. I'm asking you to risk nothing, because a life without love isn't living. It's just existing. And you've existed long enough, Theron Valdrris. It's time to live. His breath shuddered out of him. And then he pulled her into his arms and held her so tightly she thought he might never let go. 5 months later, everything shattered. Sable's pregnancy had progressed smoothly. Her belly swelled with new life, and with each passing week, Theron seemed to grow stronger rather than weaker. The curse's advance had slowed to a crawl. The frost that had crept up his arms receded entirely. Color bloomed in his cheeks. His skin, once ice-cold, now held a gentle coolness that felt almost normal. The kingdom whispered about miracles, about the mysterious queen whose very touch could heal their king. But Sable knew the truth wasn't so simple. Theron was healing because he was feeling. Every night spent in her arms, every meal shared, every private smile and quiet conversation had chipped away at the ice around his heart. He was coming alive for the first time in decades. And the curse was not pleased. She felt it sometimes, in the small hours of the night. A darkness that pressed against the edges of their happiness, waiting for its moment. The curse was patient. The curse was hungry. And the curse was not finished with Theron Valdrris. It happened on an ordinary evening. They were in her chambers, as they were most nights now. Theron sat behind her on the bed, his hands resting on her swollen belly, feeling the baby kick. Each flutter of movement brought a smile to his face that made Sable's heart soar. Strong, he murmured against her hair. Our child is strong, like their father, like their mother. He pressed a kiss to her temple. You're the strong one, Sable. You always have been. I'm just a frozen man who got lucky enough to find warmth. She turned in his arms, facing him. The firelight danced across his features, highlighting the changes that had occurred over these months. He looked younger, happier, more alive than she'd ever seen him, and she couldn't hold the words back any longer. I love you. The confession slipped out before she could stop it. 3 words, soft as a whisper, heavy as a mountain. Theron went completely still. Sable, I know I shouldn't say it. I know it's dangerous, but I can't lie anymore. Not to you, not to myself. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I love you, Theron. I love your rare smiles and your cold hands and the way you look at our child like they're already the center of your universe. I love everything you are, everything you've become, and I'm terrified that loving you is going to destroy us both, but I can't stop. I don't want to stop, He kissed her, hard and desperate and full of everything he'd been holding back. His hands cupped her face, his thumbs wiping away her tears, and when he finally pulled back, his silver eyes blazed with emotion. I love you too. The words hit her like lightning. Theron, no. I love you, he repeated, his voice breaking. I've loved you since the moment I touched you at the yielding and felt warmth for the first time in years. I've loved you through every night we've spent together. Every morning I've woken with you in my arms. I've loved you so completely, so utterly, that there's nothing left of me that isn't yours. The curse. I don't care about the curse. His grip on her face tightened. I don't care if it kills me. I refuse to die having never said these words. I love you, Sable. I love. He stopped. His eyes went wide. His hands, still cupping her face, turned to ice. Theron? He stumbled backward, clutching his chest, His face twisted with agony as frost exploded across his skin, spreading from his heart outward like cracks in a frozen lake. "No," Sable gasped. "No, no, no." Theron collapsed. She caught him before he hit the floor, but his weight drove her to her knees. His body was convulsing, his breath coming in short, painful gasps. The frost was spreading, climbing up his neck, creeping across his jaw. "Help!" Sable screamed. "Someone help me!" Guards burst through the door. Servants followed. Within moments, the room was chaos, but Sable barely noticed. She cradled Theron's head in her lap, her tears falling onto his frozen face. "Stay with me," she begged. "Please, Theron, stay with me." His silver eyes, dimming now, found hers. "Worth it," he whispered through blue lips. "Loving you. Worth it." His eyes closed. His body went still. And Sable screamed. Sable refused to leave his side. 3 days passed. 3 days of watching frost spread across Theron's body while healers shook their heads and advisors whispered about succession. 3 days of holding his ice-cold hand and begging him to fight. But he couldn't hear her. The curse had pulled him into a frozen sleep from which there seemed no awakening. On the 4th day, Meridia came to her. "There may be a way," the advisor said quietly, closing the door behind her. "But it requires you to accept what you are." Sable looked up from Theron's bedside, her eyes red from crying. "What do you mean?" "Shadow Wolf." Meridia crossed to stand beside her. "Corvinus wasn't lying at your wedding. You are one, whether you know it or not." "I don't even know what that means." "It means your bloodline carries the power to break curses." Meridia's voice dropped. "Or to create them." Shadow wolves were hunted to extinction because that power was considered too dangerous to exist. But a few bloodlines survived, hiding in plain sight, their abilities dormant and unrecognized. Sable stared at her. "You're saying I can break his curse?" "I'm saying you might be the only one who can." Meridia hesitated. "But there's a cost." "I don't care about the cost." "You should." Breaking a curse this powerful requires activating your shadow wolf nature completely. And to do that, you need to fully bond with your mate. She gestured to Theron's frozen form. "The mate bond between you exists, but it's incomplete. You've never marked each other, never performed the true claiming." Sable's hand moved unconsciously to her neck, to the unmarked skin where a mate bite should be. "He refused to claim me," she said quietly. "He was afraid it would accelerate the curse." He was probably right, but now the curse has already activated. The only question is whether you can shatter it before it shatters him. Sable looked at Theron's face, peaceful in his frozen sleep. So pale, he looked like a sculpture carved from snow. "How do I claim him if he's unconscious?" "You claim him, not the other way around." Meridia's eyes were steady. "Bite him. Mark him as yours. Complete the bond. If the legends are true, your shadow wolf power will surge through the connection and destroy the curse from within." "And if the legends are wrong?" Meridia was silent for a long moment. "Then you'll die too," she said finally. "The bond works both ways. If you claim him, and the curse proves stronger than your power, it will spread through the bond and freeze you both." Sable absorbed this information with strange calm. Death had been chasing her since she was 13 years old. Her pack had tried to drown her. Corvinus had tried to sell her. The world had tried in a dozen different ways to extinguish her existence. But she was still here, still fighting, still warm. "There's something else I need first," she said. "I need to know the truth about what I am, about why my pack really tried to kill me." Meridia nodded slowly. "Corvinus is being held in the dungeons. He was arrested after the wedding for attempting to disrupt a royal ceremony." A grim smile crossed her face. "Perhaps it's time you paid him a visit." The dungeons of Valdrris were cold and dark and stank of desperation. Sable walked through the stone corridors with guards flanking her, her hand resting on her swollen belly. She was 7 months pregnant now, heavy with the weight of new life, and every step sent aches through her body. But she didn't slow down. Corvinus waited. He was chained to the wall of his cell, his formerly proud features now gaunt and hollow. When he saw Sable approaching, his lips twisted into a sneer. "The little freak!" he spat. "Come to gloat?" Sable stopped in front of his cell, her expression calm. "I've come for the truth." "The truth?" He laughed bitterly. "The truth is that you should be dead. I held you under that river until you stopped moving. But somehow, impossibly, you survived. Why did you try to kill me? Because of what you are." Corvinus leaned forward, chains rattling. "A shadow wolf. An abomination. Your mother was a half-blood who hid her nature well enough to infiltrate our pack. But you inherited the full power. I could smell it on you the moment you turned 13. The darkness. The wrongness." Sable's fists clenched. "My mother? Killed herself when I discovered what she was." His voice held no remorse. "Threw herself off the eastern cliffs rather than face execution. Coward's way out. But you survived. And I couldn't let a shadow wolf live. Not when your kind has the power to destroy everything. My kind has the power to break curses. Your kind has the power to do anything." Corvinus's eyes blazed with fear disguised as hatred. "Create curses, break curses, bind wolves, unbind wolves. You're an abomination of nature, a walking violation of every law that governs our kind. I should have tried harder to kill you." Sable absorbed this, her mind racing. Her mother had been a shadow wolf, had hidden it, lived in fear, and ultimately died because of it. And Sable had inherited that power without ever knowing. "Who placed the curse on Theron?" she asked quietly. Corvinus hesitated. "Tell me. Why should I help you? Because if you don't, I'll have Meridia come down here with truth serum and will extract every secret you've ever kept." Sable's voice was ice. "Or, you can tell me willingly, and maybe, I'll consider reducing your sentence from execution to exile." The fight drained out of Corvinus's face. "It was the Ashvale Coven," he admitted, "witches from the southern kingdoms. They placed the curse on Valdrris the day he was crowned, payment for a debt his father refused to honor. I served as their contact, helped them gain access to the coronation." Sable's blood turned to fire. "You helped curse him?" "I helped weaken an enemy kingdom." Corvinus shrugged. "Valdrris was always too powerful. The curse was meant to end his line, end his rule, and open the northern territories to conquest. My pack stood to gain significant territory from the arrangement. And when you realized what I was, I thought I could use you." His lip curled. "A shadow wolf under my control could have broken the curse, yes, but could have also created new ones. Could have made me the most powerful alpha in the realm." He spat on the ground. "But you were useless, untrained. Your power locked so deep inside you that you didn't even know it existed." "My power is awake now." Corvinus's eyes widened. Sable turned to the guards. "Keep him alive. The council will want his testimony when this is over." She walked away without looking back. There was nothing more she needed from him. He'd given her the truth, and the truth had given her clarity. She knew what she was now. She knew why she'd been hunted, feared, nearly killed. And she knew what she had to do to save the man she loved, even if it killed her trying. The royal bedchamber was silent as a tomb. Sable stood beside Theron's frozen form, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her teeth. The frost had spread across his entire body now, turning him into a statue of ice. Only his face remained partially visible, pale and perfect and utterly still. She had hours left, maybe less. Meridia stood by the door, her expression grave. Are you certain about this? No. Sable reached out and touched Theron's frozen cheek. But I'm doing it anyway. If this fails, then at least we'll be together. She looked at Meridia with eyes that held no fear, only resolve. Whatever happens, protect our child. If we don't survive, promise me you'll raise them with love. Tell them their parents fought until the very end. Meridia's eyes glistened. I promise. Sable nodded. Then she turned back to Theron. She climbed onto the bed beside him, ignoring the cold that seeped through her clothes. She pressed her body against his frozen form, wrapped her arms around him, and lowered her mouth to his neck. The place where a mate mark belonged. I love you, she whispered against his ice-cold skin. I love you, and I claim you, and no curse in this world or any other will take you from me. She bit down. The world exploded. Power surged through Sable like nothing she'd ever felt. It started in her chest and radiated outward, a burning heat that seemed to come from the very core of her being. Her wolf rose within her, not the quiet presence she'd kept caged for so long, but something ancient and primal and impossibly powerful. Shadow Wolf. She understood now. Understood what that really meant. She was darkness and light intertwined, the power to break and the power to bind. She was every curse ever spoken and every blessing ever given. She was the shadow between fire and ice, the space where opposites merged and became something new. And she was bonded to him. The mate connection snapped into place like a key turning in a lock. Suddenly she could feel Theron's heartbeat, slow and struggling beneath the ice. She could feel his pain, his fear, his desperate clinging to life. And she could feel the curse. It was a living thing, a parasite wrapped around his heart, feeding on his emotions, growing stronger with every feeling he allowed himself. It had been dormant when he was frozen, manageable when he was numb, but his love for her had awakened it fully, and now it was trying to consume him. No, Sable thought, you don't get to have him. She poured herself into the bond, every ounce of warmth she possessed, every ember of love burning in her heart. She flooded the connection with heat and light and sheer stubborn refusal to let the cold win. The curse fought back. Ice shot through her veins. Frost spread across her skin. The cold was unimaginable, unbearable, a frozen hell that threatened to swallow her whole. But Sable had survived being held under a frozen river until her lungs filled with ice water. She had survived years of running, hiding, starving. She had survived the yielding and Corvinus and a kingdom that feared what she was. She would not be defeated by cold. She reached deeper, past the darkness, past the fear, to the very source of her power. And there, buried beneath years of suppression and terror, she found it. Fire, not ordinary fire, shadow fire. Black flames that burned without heat, that consumed curses like kindling. That existed in the space between life and death. She unleashed it. The flames poured through the mate bond, racing along the connection toward Theron's frozen heart. They met the curse and devoured it. Ice shattered. Frost melted. The parasite that had wrapped itself around his heart for decades screamed as it was consumed by shadow fire. And then, silence. Warmth. Sable's eyes flew open. She was lying on the bed, her body pressed against Theron's, her teeth still latched onto his neck. But his skin wasn't cold anymore. It was warm. Hot. Even. Normal. She released him and pulled back, terrified of what she might see. Theron's eyes opened. They were still silver, but the cold was gone from them. They blazed with life, with love, with something wild and fierce and free. Sable, he breathed. Then he was kissing her, and she was crying. And their baby was kicking between them as if celebrating along with its parents. How? Theron gasped between kisses. The curse. Broken. Sable laughed through her tears. Gone. Forever. He pulled back to look at her, his warm hands cupping her face. You saved me. We saved each other. The door burst open and Meridia rushed in, followed by guards and healers and what seemed like half the castle. But they all stopped short at the sight before them. The king was sitting up in bed, very much alive, his arms wrapped around his very pregnant queen. It worked, Meridia breathed. It worked, Sable confirmed. In the weeks that followed, the kingdom celebrated like never before. The curse was not just broken for Theron, it was broken for the entire Valdrris bloodline. Their son, yet born 1 month later with his father's silver eyes and his mother's warm spirit, would never know the touch of that ancient evil. Nor would any of his descendants. The Ashvale coven was hunted down and brought to justice. Corvinus was executed for his crimes against both crowns. And shadow wolves, long feared and persecuted, were officially recognized as protected citizens of Valdrris, their powers respected rather than reviled. On a warm spring morning, 3 months after their son's birth, Sable stood in the royal gardens with Theron beside her. Little Caspian slept peacefully in his father's arms, his tiny fists curled against his chest. You know, Theron said quietly, I spent my entire life believing love would kill me. And now? He looked at her, his silver eyes glowing with warmth. Now I know it saved me. You saved me. Or in every way a person can be saved. Sable leaned into him, pressing a kiss to his shoulder. We saved each other. The scentless girl from the yielding and the frozen king who claimed her. Theron smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Quite the story. The best kind of story, Sable agreed. The kind where the monsters lose, and the broken people find their way home. Theron bent to kiss her, slow and deep and full of promise. Welcome home, my queen, he murmured against her lips. Sable smiled. I was home the moment you said my name. Thank you for listening to this story. Let me know what you thought in the comments. I read every single one, and they mean more to me than you know.